So I just going to make sure I've got this all right. A call to order, and I'm going to read the statement. So this meeting is being held pursuant in and in compliance with the Albemarle County Continuity of Government Ordinance. Note that this meeting is being recorded. Also that this is an online meeting. The associated chats are public record. Even private comments directed only to specific members are likely to be subject to the disclosure under the Freedom of Information Act. Oh, hi, Lonnie. How are you?
Hey, how's it going? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, welcome. And so we have a quorum, I believe. And I just want to really welcome, thank everybody for being here, and welcome Kate Malik, who's our new member. And just so pleased that she is joining us. Thank you so much. And we welcome you, and we'll do what we can to get you up to speed. But we're really glad that you're here.
Well,
and
thank you for the welcome. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm really excited to work with you, Kate. And I also want to welcome some of our guests that are not in the meeting, but I know that we have Ruth Douglas is here. And is there anyone else who is, what do I want to say? What is the right word? Not in the meeting, but listening in.
Attendee, I think.
An attendee.
Yeah. Yes. If you go on the right, you can look and see, but it looks like Tom Olivier is here, Gary Koenig, Margaret Mellis. Oh, I'm going to mispronounce her name.
Hi, Tom Olivier.
Tom Olivier.
Hi, Tom Olivier's here. I don't know if you can hear me. But,
Hi, Tom.
Hey, Tom.
hello.
Hi, Tom.
Hi, everyone.
It's great to have you. Thanks for joining us.
Yep, and Rod and
Thank
Maggie
you.
Walker as well.
All right. Gosh, I'm weird. I'm trying to think. Oh, I see attendees.
Yeah.
Fantastic. All right. Welcome to Rod and Maggie. Thank you for being here. And Gary Koenig, welcome. And Margaret, thank you for being here and helping us out. All right. So we are going to go ahead and I don't know if Kim could, if we need to look at the minutes. Oh, no, we're going to review the agenda that we have in front of us, and then we are going to look at the minutes.
So, sorry, do you have the agenda first? Let's see. My apologies.
No apology needed.
There we go. Can you all see the agenda?
Oh, yeah. Bigger.
All right.
I would move the adoption of the agenda.
Do we have a second?
I second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, great. So the agenda has been reviewed and approved. And then we were going to look at our June minutes.
So process questions, shouldn't we be doing a roll call vote? Or did I bring this up last time? For electronic meeting, I thought we're supposed to do a roll call vote.
We can do that. All right, so on that one, Lonnie.
Aye.
All right, Emily,
Aye.
Peggy,
Aye.
Michael,
Aye.
Kate,
Aye.
and I believe Kenan and Nancy are not here.
Right.
All right, so it looks like we have approval of that and we can move on. All right, thank you so much. Thanks, Tamani. And so now we have the June minutes, and I hope everybody got a chance to review those. And does anybody have any discussion about that or any questions?
No.
All right, is there somebody who would like to move to approve these?
I move to approve the adoption of the minutes.
I second.
And let's go ahead and do a roll call. Peggy,
Aye. Approve. Yeah.
Aye.
Michael,
Aye.
Lonnie,
Abstain.
and,
I was here.
and Kate.
Do you need my vote? I was not a participating member for that meeting. I was just a visitor.
And you could say abstain.
I guess you can abstain.
I'm glad to abstain.
Okay. And so can we go ahead and approve now? Yep.
Yeah.
All
Yes.
right. Thank you so much. All right. So we are going to go ahead and move on to the first item on the agenda, which are some follow-ups. And so we did have some important site updates. And Kim had an opportunity to go to Licking Hole Basin, Kim, is that correct?
Great.
And you saw the bald eagles?
I did, and it wasn't an intentional important site visit. Actually, it was in April, and I didn't realize it was even an important site at that time. But I just thought I would let you all know that I was there visiting the stormwater facility with our watershed stewardship manager, Laura Williamson, and we saw the bald eagles and we saw them on the nest. So I did make an update in the important site folder. I thought I would just let you all know.
All right.
Nice.
Thank you very much, Kim. And then I'm going to report, and I would like Kim and Peggy to chime in, but we, the three of us made a visit to the Blenheim Grassland, and part of it is actually on my property, which was really cool because I had these amazing naturalists with me to help point out some things that I wasn't really aware of. So it was really great to go with Peggy and Kim. And what was interesting about the Blenheim Grasslands is it exists in a power line easement. And they had just completed about a year and a half ago replacing the large power poles. And so Dominion had done some work in their reseeding, and they had said that they were going to reseed it with the native, whatever was there before will be there again, is what they told me. But we ended up finding, what was it? Purple love grass. Was that, I think that's what Kim had said there was a lot of there. So it was interesting to see how that had grown back, and also a stand of bamboo that's making its way in there.
That was there previously, though. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's actually encroaching quite a bit. So I don't know if,
Roads.
Did you key the ID? Sorry, did you key the bamboo? Do you know what species it is?
no.
You did verify it's a non-native. We do have a native bamboo in Albemarle County. So if it may be important to key it just to make sure it is non-native.
Huh, I didn't know that. Well,
Yeah, our native bamboo is thinner and it has papery sheaths on the stem.
huh. Oh, I'm glad to know that. Well, I will check that out, because there's another stand of bamboo over there that is a little bit thinner. And then we also went to Tufton, and Peggy gave us a nice walk through one of these cow pastures, and we got a chance to see the work that's being done over there with the creation of the farm and all the plantings. It was really amazing. And we did get a chance to see the flame flower, but apparently it blooms between 3:30 and 5:30. So it blooms later in the evening. And so we didn't get to see it in bloom, but we could definitely see that there were some undisturbed flat rocks, but then there were several that actually the cows had been on and trampled, and there was quite a bit of manure deposited. So we had a discussion about like how we could move forward and encouraging the foundation to rope that area off and somehow protect it. So I don't know if anybody wants to add anything.
How large is the area that would need protection for the
It's
flame?
very small.
It's not that big. It's maybe quarter of an acre.
Sure. Is it in the middle or is it at an edge?
It's near Milton Road,
Okay.
and it's near the when you turn off on the Tufton Road, Tufton Farm Drive. It's on your left, and it's a large rock outcrop, and it's probably, what would you say, a quarter of an acre or something? It's
Yeah, if that.
Smaller than that even.
even that.
There's some pictures that I saved to the Google Drive if anybody, of both of the Blenheim Grassland and the Tufton site, if anyone wants to take a look. And some from the Tufton site that show the disturbance, the level of disturbance that's happening there.
Yeah, they were supposed to keep the cows out of that little section, but obviously they've been allowed to get in there recently because we could see some real fresh disturbance and, some areas of manure that had just kind of wrecked everything. So, and then there's also other invasive thistles, and there's the Lespedeza, that's not the native one, and other things that are growing all nearby. So it's.
But it did seem if you could rope off the rocks that that it would. It looked like an area that wasn't prone to invasives actually invading the rock surface.
Hey, isn't there an area when you go, like there's the main rocks that are sort of in the field, and then you go up a little bit and there's another rocky area sort of a little bit more in the woods, and I seem to remember that there was some prickly pear there.
Well, that's up on Montalto. I don't know if there's any prickly pear at Tufton.
Yeah, maybe not.
But there are a couple of other rock outcrops out there, and it's possible. But I know that the main one we always looked at was on Montalto. That's still there, but
I've never been to Montalto. That would be.
I thought you went up there with Devin and me. We took you up there.
Did you?
You and Devin were all over that prickly pear.
Are you sure it was me? Because I don't remember that.
I don't know. Anyway, we'll have to think about it.
Nevertheless, is there anybody else who had been out to any of the sites or have scheduled a visit or contacted a landowner?
Not a private landowner. I don't know on your agenda if the Darden visit is.
Oh, not yet.
Yeah.
But hi, Kenan. Nice to have
Hey,
you. Great to see you.
Yeah. So that's not one of the. It's a public site. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, so we're just talking about follow-ups for the important sites, and then in our new business, I think we've got you down here to talk about that.
So in terms of sites, I did get an interesting inquiry recently. I got an inquiry from the Smithsonian, who's doing research on native orchids, and they wanted more information on one of the Nelson County sites that I knew about for large purple fringed orchid. And while I was in conversation with them, I knew that Smithsonian had also done some research on purple fringeless orchid. I said, I mentioned to them, said, that we do have 3 sites for that in Albemarle County too. And they're like, wow, well, we may be getting back with you about that some later time. So we may at some point have to, we field some questions from the Smithsonian. So
that's really cool. Nice, thank you. All right, so we're going to move on to our new business, and we had the great opportunity to Kim and I and Nancy met with a new chief of parks, parks planning rather, and so Kim, maybe you would give a little update about that. And you had actually done a follow-up meeting as well.
That's right. Yeah. So Nancy and Christine and I met with Tim Padalino, who's the chief of parks planning, and we talked a little bit about volunteers in parks and some opportunities for the NHC that we've discussed as a group the past couple of months. So I think that was really productive. And then I had a follow-up meeting with the Parks and Recreation Planning and Coordination Team, and talked a little bit more about, well, briefly just talked about the Biodiversity Action Plan in general, and then some opportunities for the NHC to, work on projects and further the goals of implementing the BAP in county parks. Since that came up and has continued to come up as a strong interest of this group. So they were very receptive and interested, and they have some specific ideas that we can talk about. So I think for now, specifically, we will likely focus on Biscuit Run and developing or facilitating development of an invasive species management plan, and maybe also some educational efforts. There was a mention of Charlotte Humphreys, and I think some of you may have already done some work with them out there or talked about it. So I'd be interested in learning more about that.
Yeah. Thank you. Any questions about that, you guys?
Sort of some kind of related to that. I don't know if any of you have caught the recent media coverage about Sugar Hollow, but apparently there's been a lot of, Sugar Hollow is a weird one because the actual area around the reservoir is actually owned by Charlottesville. But then there's the areas outside of it that are owned by Albemarle County, and Trout Unlimited also owns some land there. So there's been a lot of, in the original Biodiversity Action Report, Sugar Hollow was mentioned as a place of significant biodiversity, but recent years has been receiving a huge amount of traffic from university students in particular, a lot of which are going to Blue Hole or other places. And so there's been a lot of overuse of the area and not a lot of great policing. And so there are some very interesting species of note in that corridor all along the road. And it'd be nice to know if Parks has any plans for that area. What's the status of the plans working with the city for trying to manage that situation? Then also there's the hemlock situation at Sugar Hollow too, which is the hemlocks. It used to be dominated by hemlocks, and now they're dying off, or died off almost.
Bonnie, what did you say was interesting species along there? You said there were some interesting species of what?
Yeah, there are some interesting species. Some that I think of, golden club, for example. There's some sites for golden club there. There's also some, there's a occurrence of a rhododendron maximum there that we mentioned in the biodiversity. It's one of those species that's mentioned as priority in the county, but there's not been a documentation of it there on Sugar Hollow, but it's definitely there. There's also an occurrence of mock orange, of the native mock orange, Philadelphus anidoris.
Oh.
And then there's also just a huge number of spring ephemerals there, of Dutchman's breeches and other spring ephemerals in that area. It's a very diverse area.
Yeah, great.
Lonnie, I think you bring up just an interesting point, because I know that area does get a lot of traffic, and so it's good to think about that. And so I want to report on a meeting that Kim and I had with Rod and Maggie Walker from Blue Ridge Prism, and they actually sent just a document thinking about how the county, what we can do, how we can work with them and partner with them to think about invasives and better management of that in education in the county. And so it was a great conversation that we had. They had sent over an example of a great partnership. It's called Green Seattle, and where they have enlisted all these volunteers and educated people about invasives in their parks. They've got lots of little pocket parks where you can get people involved and really actively sort of build this core, this really an army of people that can help to combat this problem. And once you get people out there identifying and pulling those invasives, now they know about that. So there isn't a better way to educate people than actually getting them out there and doing the work. So that was really an inspiring model. And we talked a little bit about thinking about Biscuit Run in particular, the possibility of doing an inventory there, and also working with parks and rec to think about the Trail Ambassador program, and is it possible to have some type of a group of citizen volunteers. But then realizing that there's a problem with that, because if you want to allow those volunteers to use herbicides, then there are some complications around that. And we've had Rod and Maggie have sent some, reached out and sent back some information, and it sounds like that could be a real sticking point. And it sounds like the tree stewards have tried to work with the city to get permission to apply those herbicides, and they've had trouble there. So still needs to be investigated, but really excited to begin that partnership, working with them. And we're going to have a follow-up meeting, I believe, the end of this month or early next month to continue that conversation. So I just wanted to report to you about that. I'm really
There's
be working
some
with
species that there's some species not great, but some species that are very easy to remove by hand.
Right.
Often when we're hiking, if I see garlic mustard along trails, I'll pull the garlic mustard out.
Right.
And so having at least volunteers know that as they're walking along, if if they spot things like that are easily removable by hand.
Exactly.
Yeah, and there's a couple of themes that have come out of that discussion, and I see Rod and Maggie are here, so I'll let them chime in too. But out of that discussion and the follow-up discussions with county parks, and I'm still working on getting some of the answers about specifically what the county's policies are before we gather back together and talk about volunteers and how we might move some of these efforts forward. So just to let you know, I haven't forgotten. It's just in progress.
And I don't know if Rod or Maggie want to chime in.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for the opportunity. We are here.
I'm chiming, but just now sitting, so I'll catch up, I hope.
Yeah, we look forward to seeing where this conversation leads. And I may add, Lonnie, that with regard to Sugar Hollow, but between the second and third bridge, yeah, I have in mind to put together a coalition of landowners, or at least get their permission to start working on some of the invasive plants that we find in Sugar Hollow. And at this point, we tentatively believe that we have eliminated all the bamboo from Sugar Hollow.
Nice.
We'll see if it's really dead and gone, but but we've attempted to eliminate it literally all of it, and as time permits, I'm going to try and get landowner permissions to go after some other species.
So you got Fred's property.
Yes,
Fred property?
that was the last one, and the biggest one.
Well, it's nice to know that you're doing that. If you need another volunteer, and I can do it from a safe distance, then let me know.
Yeah, no problem. But if you want to sit down someday and talk about strategies for Sugar Hollow, I'd be happy to participate.
Yeah, I'd love to. I'd also like to talk about the hemlock situation. We've treated the hemlocks on our property at some considerable expense. But the real lasting way to do it is there's some insects that you can purchase, but you need to have a group of neighborhoods. I mean, like people that have done it successfully. You have they go in and get a big order, and then they distribute them around the neighborhood. So I'd love to see if we could get some of the hemlock adelgid beetles, and if there's some way to I don't know, use Nextdoor or something to get a whole bunch of people to get the beetles so we can bring back the hemlocks.
Yeah, so yeah, do you have any data on how successful those beetles are in retaining life in the hemlocks? I mean, yeah, do the hemlocks actually survive where those beetles are released? Because I'm aware of the existence of them, but what I've never seen is a study that says, yep, that's a way to save the hemlocks.
Yeah, I believe I have seen some information about that. I don't know how preliminary it was, but I will do some research on that and get back with you.
Yeah, if you do, because I've also used chemical on hemlocks, to save them from the woolly adelgid, and it does work. And so it's it can be done on a tree by tree basis. It's hard to do it on a landscape scale, though.
As a follow-up to that, just really briefly, because it also ties into the work in county parks. I know all of you probably are aware of the Hemlock Project at Biscuit Run, where the trees were treated last year. So I'm heading out there tomorrow with some of the staff from Parks and Recreation and from Department of Forestry to do some monitoring of the trees there and see if there's any damage from the injection sites and just generally how they're doing. So I will update everybody, and I apologize I didn't send out a broader invitation, but it is already a kind of big group. So with COVID, I felt like we needed to kind of keep it a little bit small. But I will report back and let you all know how it looks down there.
Great, thank you.
Take some pictures.
Yeah, thank you all, by the way, for what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you. And really, thank you for participating and coming to our meetings, and really looking forward to this partnership with you guys.
Wow, thank you.
And what I want to do is, Kenan, you had gone down to Darden's house, so we'd love to hear what you saw and your thoughts on that. And I think you had some questions for us.
You're muted, Kenan.
Hi, I've been there a few times, and thinking about a strategy, because I haven't done this with a public site, looking at it and advising from this committee, what's the best way to go about advising on I don't know if anyone else has advised on a public site comprehensively, or if there's a sort of a set of guidelines. So I was sort of first putting that together. Darden Tow, as you know, is right on the Rivanna River. So it's a significant part of the greenway of the Rivanna and that floodplain. And so that was one aspect. I thought that could be strengthened. One is there are invasive exotic plants in there. I saw mimosa primarily, and autumn olive, and then of course Lonicera. And there are a number of other invasive exotics as well, but those were the big plants that stood out. I didn't see anything, maybe someone else knows about rare plants. I didn't see any particularly rare plants, but it's a pretty cool alluvial wash dune ecosystem that's right along the river there. It's really these sort of mounded dunes with plants, and of course lots of people are using it, so there are paths through it. Some are intentional and some are established by the county, and then there are a lot of worn paths all in and out, people using it heavily, but all kinds of wildlife, green herons and myriad fish and things like that along the corridor. But it seems like things what we can do we might advise the county in light of trying to maintain and enhance biodiversity would be strengthen that greenway, give it more of a buffer than it has. Another thing, addressing invasive plants in general in the majority of the park. Now, the majority of the park is the majority of the park by far is lawn. A lot of that is athletic fields. And going into repeat visits, I see all the different ways that it's used, and I think the lawn, lots of the lawn makes sense for what the intention of the park is. Even so, I think we could probably reduce the lawn by 10 to 25% and lose no functionality of the park, which would be great. You could have meadows, some forest, meadows that are mowed once a year as opposed to, every 2 weeks. I think it could be a drop in budget right there, and fossil fuels and everything else. And then climate issues. To me, this is a relatively wet summer, but the park seems desiccated from lack of trees. It's there are a lot of ash trees that are planted in the parking lot, and those are half dead. And then a lot of unused lawn areas that are just absolutely open and burning in the sun could be planted with groves of trees, and you could watch the soccer or baseball from shaded areas rather than sitting in the hot sun. I know as a father going to the games there, it can get pretty hot in the summer. So so I think addressing climate issues, primarily shading, that park can be a source of cooling for the city, because it really is an urban park just about now, surrounded on most sides except the Ravenna by buildings, commercial or residential roads. That can be a source of cooling for this urban area rather than a point of heat, which right now it seems like in some ways it's hot and open and mostly lawn and pavement.
I agree. It seems so desolate. Every time I go out there, I find it very unappealing.
Yeah, it's
big areas of grass. Yeah.
And it's funny, when I first went there, I said, well, gosh, we could turn 50% of it into meadows and probably another 20% into trees. But I think going there repeatedly, even on 4th of July, just seeing how people use the slopes, and it's having that ability to utilize that lawn, I think is and that's something to bring up with the group. And what I'll do is some diagrams to think about that, is like, where do you focus your efforts to reverse the lawn, and what's practical and what are the uses? And I think talking to the officials at Parks and Rec and finding out what all the myriad of uses for the park is, because there may be unknown uses we don't know about, like a fair at some time in the spring or something where they need tent space. But the other thing I think addressing is there's a little pond there that probably everyone has seen. It's mowed right to the edge. Probably has all kinds of critters living in it, but I think having a better buffer around it of native plants, that would be a place where volunteers could plant native wetland plants. A totally different ecosystem than, say, the river that's right there, but a good one for a number of native plants. That would be great. I think stormwater in general, there's a parking lot right by the Ravenna. The county can model something better than draining, just like the city does, drains right into the Ravenna. There's one little biofilter in the whole park that I think was established with the Lewis and Clark site, which is nice little biofilter. And there's a meadow and a path there that's a nice model for what the rest of the park could be. It's nice. I didn't even know that was there. It's back on the back. It's a nice little walk, and then it leads down to the edge of the river, which is quite beautiful in spots. But there could be more of that. It could be planted. Native meadows could be pretty easily planted, and I think it would more than pay for itself over time with the lack of mowing. The mowing is, I can't imagine how many. It's probably $100,000 a year in mowing. I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe it's 200,000, just the acreage that's mowed, and some of it has to be for the fields. And then thinking about, is it our place to address energy? Should we be putting solar panels on the top of the various buildings and or maybe even a solar farm? Is that a possibility that the county could get some funds from establishing a solar farm? Because those are sources of revenue now in open areas. So is there some area where we could put solar panels in? So those are
solar panels over top of parking lots.
Oh, great idea. Yeah.
That's what they do up in Massachusetts. I've seen it. It works really well.
Google headquarters has that, among others. Yeah. So that kind of thing. So I was thinking there could be a list of 7 main areas: lawn reduction, invasive plants, climate issues, shading, Ravenna Greenway, strengthening, stormwater, pond, improve habitat, and energy. So I'm throwing that out to you all. Is there something else that you can think of that I can address? But
Yeah, I want to just thank you because I think that you have given us such a great list of ways of improving the park. And I think it would make it more beautiful and more pleasant to visit in so many ways. And I agree, like the county should be modeling best practices there. So, and I just want to add that Ruth Douglas, I know, has called and she's an attendee, but she was also on our call when we met with Ron and Maggie Walker about invasives, and she had sent a list of invasives that she had seen along that trail. And she thought, you know, putting out this idea of perhaps having some markers in front of some of those invasive plants with maybe a QR code. So I think that there's that, I feel like there are a lot of people that visit that park and it gets a lot of traffic and it would be a great focus area.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
All down the Ravenna Trail too.
What's that?
You could extend like those QR codes, and the invasives just go all the way down the Ravenna, you know, to Monticello, basically. I mean,
Right.
yeah.
I mean, you know, some of these, and a number of these things, planting trees and putting meadows in, would just help the park aesthetically. It's just so, it's sort of like it hasn't been updated in many years since when it was built, and a lot of trees have died. It's getting more exposed. So it seems like it could be a good thing.
Is there any night lights there? I've never been there at night, but is that an issue we could address? Night pollution?
Yeah, that's a good point. There is night lights, and I haven't been there when the night lights are on, but there are lights there.
Yeah, there's not lit fields though. I mean, there might be lights in the parking lot and stuff, but there's not lit fields. I mean, everybody remembers this is the place where they were talking about turning the fields into turf. And then I think they were considering putting up lighting probably for that to increase the usage of that. So that's kind of good to keep in mind. And I know Kate probably knows more than I do about that if she wants to add something. But I will say that, you know, those athletic fields, I mean, having hosted Youth Ultimate over there and knowing how it looks on the weekends when soccer season is in session and stuff, and playing Ultimate there as an adult, they get heavy usage. There's not a lot of county parks with fields, right? There's just not. So they do get a lot of heavy usage. I totally agree with Kenan that there are opportunities to include more meadow in some of the spaces around the edges of where they are mowing. But the fields themselves, I think you'd be hard pressed to convince anybody that you're going to get rid of any of the actual field spaces that are.
Yeah,
that are used.
I would probably, I think the lawn reduction, I think, would probably be 10 or 20% out of the.
Yeah, no, I agree. The edge, I mean, there's a space for that.
Yeah, we definitely don't want to reduce play space or gathering space. That's what, you know, these parks function an incredibly important thing. But I think as somebody who's been up on those soccer fields a fair amount, just like you have, probably not as much, but going up there, sitting in the sun there for an hour, you know, when I was up there one day, there's 2 trees that are out near the soccer fields, and there were clusters of different people under those 2 trees, you know, and I was just imagining if you had a sort of a long copse of trees that line the soccer fields that you could see through and get underneath, it would make it so much more pleasant. You know, just if you had a grid of trees fairly spaced far apart, but provided a nice canopy that you could then see out to the soccer fields, it would just be so much nicer.
Yeah, I think there might be space for that. I will say that for Ultimate, we don't, and for other sports that I've seen there, the soccer fields don't define exactly where other people play. We play cross field to the soccer fields in some ways to make our fields fit and stuff. So, I mean, it would be good to get a lot of different voices as to how the fields are used. You know, I think there's some natural spaces between sort of like an upper field and sort of a lower field, you know, that would be an appropriate place for those where clearly no field space is going to be used, but it is the in-between space that trees or something could be useful.
That's what, that's the kind of feedback that I want to get from everybody and, and the county also is just, what are the unknown uses? Because I see the fields. Yeah, but if people are actually using all those interstitial lawn areas, then yeah, we don't want to reduce that or put trees in it if you're throwing Frisbees.
Right.
But,
So, yeah.
but anyway, I think it can be a lot nicer park. I mean, the whole entrance is, the trees are half alive along there and they've been shaved off because of the power lines. I mean, it could be a lot nicer and still function pretty well.
Agreed. Kate, do you have anything to add about the status of that turf?
As of now, it wasn't included for funding. So the project has not disappeared completely, but the funding source at this time is not available. So the project isn't continuing. It's kind of just in a holding pattern. With regard to the lighting, there was, I think we dug up a past agreement from when the park was created in its inception documents. I don't think I have that particular piece where there was an agreement made that they would not have lit fields there. So that's something that would require a special exception. That's just neither here nor there. But other than that, I mean, talking about heat with grass fields, it just makes me cringe thinking if there were a huge heat sink, synthetic field, how much worse the egg frying factor would be for anyone on site.
Mm-hmm. They get so hot.
They can be upwards of 150 degrees easily to touch. So yeah, anyway, it's an interesting process, but it has not disappeared. It still exists and can come back at a future date.
What can come back at a future date?
The synthetic turf project that was proposed for building at Darden Town. It's not included in this budget at this time, but I'm assuming it'll come back in the future.
And then probably if that happens, that might be that they install stormwater protection measures with those. Often those fields are porous actually, and they are stormwater catchments, but that might be a good spur to put some biofilters in downstream.
To address what you had stated earlier about climate change mitigation factors, so many of the wonderful ideas that you had about updating the park to make it much more of a climate friendly or an opposing factor for climate change would be undone by a synthetic turf application. So hopefully we'll eventually find a better solution than that. Because the wonderful park-centric ideas really are a priority for that location. It's such a great resource.
Yeah. Good spot.
All right. I was just going to encourage us. This has been a great conversation, and it really is a great segue now into thinking about our prioritized work plan. And I just want to let you guys know that we're going to end our meeting at 6:50. Carolyn has another meeting that she's got to, I don't know, but she is like the monitor of, but so if that's okay with everybody, we're just going to go ahead and to jump into that, because so much of Ken and what you have brought forth and what you so many people have talked about will fit in really nicely to the discussion of the work plan. And I just want to really say thank you to Kim, because she found this great template for thinking about how do we take those 9 goals that are in the BAP and really organize those goals and think about the actions that we're going to take, who can work on those actions. And I think it's going to be great because it's a way of actually monitoring our progress as we go along as well. And so I hope that people have had a chance to take a look at those. I hope everybody did get a chance to see that work plan, but I think it's really great. And it is, like I said, it's a work in progress. And I know that I had put in some names and Kim had as well. But I think, at this point, we can add our names to the things that we think that we would like to participate and be part of. And maybe this will lead us to think about like smaller subcommittee groups that can work on those specific action plans. I hope that makes sense. But Kim, do you have that you
Yeah, I'm sharing it now. Can you all see the work plan? Can everybody see it? Okay.
Yeah.
And if I can I just want to add just really quick to what Christine said, is that what I did here was really just organize all of the information that you all had provided into this framework. So none of it is really my doing. It's all just organization information that you have given us to Christine and I, and put it into this format that we hope will be useful in just focusing and organizing the goals that were already set by the BAP, by the annual plan, and you know, the priorities that you all discussed and emailed us about. So
yeah, so I'm wondering if we should just go through it together and really welcome feedback. What do you guys think of the format? Is there any feedback about the format and how it's laid out? Does it seem to work for everybody?
Yeah, looks pretty straightforward.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's very helpful because it breaks all of these very large goals into specific items and areas of responsibility. So I think it's very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else have any feedback about that?
And I think Kim is being modest. I mean, you know, we may have had a lot of data here, but pulling it together and organizing like this is not a small thing to do.
Agreed. Agreed.
Christine, can I add one more comment that I just thought of? Is that I also got a comment that we may change the name, and I put it out to all of you to think about whether this should be more of a biodiversity action plan, implementation plan, because it involves not just the committee, but myself and other partners like the Blue Ridge Prism. So just throwing that out there for you all to think about.
Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, like I would certainly want Blue Ridge Prism involved with organizing volunteers to remove invasive plants and that sort of thing. I mean, that's something I couldn't do on my own for sure. Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting point. I wonder if this might be better as a landscape orientation or even on 11 by 17, so you could put more notes and you could have another column which might be committee members and then non-committee, because you may have whole groups that you want to have help, like the tree stewards or PRISM, or so there might be some other column that differentiates, because it seems like a good way to keep track of what we're doing just within this group. But then if we start having all these other groups involved, it may get fairly complex. That might be worth having, another column.
Yeah. I like the idea of putting it in landscape, actually, because hopefully we're going to have all those progress and completion and measurements are going to fill up, right? Landscape
is more appropriate too, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Looking at it, I think I'm looking at the live version. It looks like it is already.
Is it? Yeah.
Unless I'm looking at a different version. It's already a landscape document.
Yeah, I was just meaning enough for another column or two if we need them.
Oh, very nice. So if there are no...
It is. It might just be the view here. It is landscape, but we can adjust it if.
So I think if there are no more thoughts on just the format, and thank you, Kenan. I think that makes sense so we have our partner groups there, but perhaps we can start out with the first one on this list here. And I think that Kim had made note that they're not actually, here we have the BAT goal 5, but this, this idea of promoting county-owned lands that conserves and enhances biodiversity, this seems to have come up quite a bit, and we are beginning to really, I think, focus more. It makes sense in some ways to be able to have some influence on those county lands. And so you can see what we've begun here, and perhaps this is a good place to even add some of your thoughts, Kenan, on Darden Tow. And because it sounds like there are some steps that we can begin to take there as well. So we've got organized it. I think we could almost have a new column there, and perhaps is that something you've begun this process, and it sounds like you're going to perhaps make some drawings and kind of begin to visualize and actually put on paper how some changes could be made.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to figure out what the best way to do that, but I thought if nothing else, some kind of paper document of some sort to have a list, and then possibly some diagrams or something.
I think that's great, because nothing like seeing it on paper, right?
So, you know, I was thinking too about Darden Tow, and it's close to one of our biodiversity sites, actually close to several of our biodiversity sites. If you proceed north from Darden Tow, then into where it becomes wood, those trails go up into a wooded area full of spring ephemerals, like full of bluebells, and that becomes actually a very biodiverse area. If you proceed, which I think it's south, maybe I have my directions wrong, but I think it's south, you go towards the bridge.
Yeah.
After you go sort of under the bridge on the other side of the river, that whole stretch is really diverse with lots of rock outcrop species and spring ephemerals.
Proud
And
lilies,
so,
yeah.
So it's interesting that it's actually kind of odd that Darden Tow is so devoid of biodiversity, because the soil there and all the conditions, you know, if you look at other areas that are more undisturbed, they have a lot of biodiversity. So there's a lot of opportunities to learn from those nearby areas of what kind of biodiversity should be in that area that's missing.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also one of the things that strikes me is there's a lot of steep slopes there that to me seem like they'd be a pain to mow and unnecessary. They're not really useful for a lot of other things because of their steepness. And so those would be ideal places for, you know, for what I'd call conservation landscaping.
Right.
And one of the unusual thing in Charlottesville, you know, there's the Charlottesville Conservation Assistance Program, and now Albemarle County has an Albemarle Conservation Assistance Program. For those of you who, most of you know, I serve also on the Natural Heritage Committee. I'm sorry, also on the Thomas Jefferson Soil Water Conservation District. Used to saying it the other way around. And we help manage that for the county. But in the city can apply for its own funds. I don't know if that's true in the county as well, but there should be no reason why the county itself can't apply for the Conservation Assistance Program to fund something like a wildflower meadow at Darden Tower and other places. It seems like if you did like a GIS, if you went on the GIS layer of Darden Tower and looked at the critical slopes,
Mm-hmm.
you'd probably have a good map of where you probably need to put conservation landscaping. But
It's a good point. Some of the steep slopes there are for viewing, I think. I mean, it's one reason there's not more nature there is almost the entire site, except for the edges and a few little hills have been regraded to be, you know, for use. But there are some that aren't facing fields that I think are appropriate, some swales. So yeah, it's a good point. I think I think we could cut down a lot on the maintenance there, and it could be a whole lot nicer.
Be good to do more native. So Lewis and Clark Center tried doing some a Lewis and Clark, you know, Native American
Mm-hmm.
Vegetable garden at one point. And of course, that was stupid because the deer ate it. But yeah, I think there could be, you know, it's kind of barren around that site too, which
yeah,
you know,
it's a little bare.
I was on their board for a while.
Nice meadow there, Peggy. I don't know if you've seen that meadow. There's a nice meadow that runs sort of along the road, along Route 20, sort of between that. It's got a mowed path through it. It's a nice little walk.
Yeah, I haven't been there since the summer, or it was in
Yeah.
the time when I was there. So yeah.
I didn't know that trail was there either, so I'm discovering
Yeah.
a lot about that park that I didn't know also.
You were saying something, Lonnie, about being on the board, or?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
used to be on the board of the Lewis and Clark Exploratory Center, and so I have sort of a passing familiarity with some of the various different things that have been done there or tried. I had always, that part is sort of governed by them, but I think they'd be open to suggestions, particularly if they came with funding. I always wish that they could have done more with the green roof. It seemed like a missed opportunity there. The green roof was just, I can't remember what now, if they just planted in grass or something, but it really should have been planted in native species. But there's a lot of opportunities around the park, I think. I'd worked a little bit on those biofilters with RAP.
Oh yeah, that's nice.
So can I just, Christine, add one more quick thing about the recommendations for Darden Town. I don't know if you already had a plan for how to provide them, but in addition to providing them another way, you may consider the Rivanna River Corridor Plan, if you're not aware of that. But if you go to the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission, you can read phase 1 if you haven't already. And I just attended a meeting yesterday of the technical committee, and I think there will be very soon an open public engagement process where they'll be soliciting feedback from the public on the plan. So it might be a good opportunity to bring forth some ideas.
Yeah.
I think that's something that should be explicitly a goal actually in here. Is that's a pretty important plan, and it could go really well or it could go really wrong, because the two different ways that you can think about the corridor. I think there's some interest in saying, we could have, the Rivanna River is a commercial opportunity. You could have restaurants, you could have other things that are sort of river facing. But then that's kind of also in conflict with the idea of cleaning up the river and providing more buffer. And so there's some conflicts there, and potential conflicts in that plan that I think deserves some review.
Good point. Yeah, that's what I think you're right, Lonnie. And Kim. I think getting involved in what that plan is a really important thing. I'd forgotten about that plan that's out there. Is there a consultant working on it? Do you know? I guess I'll find out when I go on the website.
Right now, it's a partnership with the city and the county and the Planning District Commission.
Okay.
There might be a contact on the website. But I want to just add, Christine, I'm going to pass it back to you, but just that for each of these bullets, I put extra spaces, and you can add extra spaces. And this is going to be, the one I'm editing now is on Word just for ease during the meeting, but I'll put it right back up on the Google Drive. And you all can add and fill in these rows as you see fit.
And so thank you, Kim. And Kenan, do you think that perhaps an action step for you would be to draw up some of those plans before our August meeting? Would that be, and take a look at the corridor plan?
Yeah, possibly. It's also actually sort of a busy time right now for work and vacation and kids without camper jobs. It's a scene. I mean teens without jobs or camp. So yeah, I'll just say maybe. I think I will have some things. I don't know what I'll have, and I don't plan on doing a design for the park because that, but I think maybe some diagramming.
Yeah.
Diagram possible things. So hopefully I'll have something, but I'm not going to promise by August.
That sounds great. And Kim, do we have a few months, or is this coming up really soon?
I think there's time.
Okay.
I'll let
So-
you know when I find out, but I don't think it's going to be imminent.
So
Yeah, well, I'll have more certainly in a month or so.
you know, there's one more thing that should be under, that could be under that first goal. And Kim kind of referenced it a little bit, which was that, you know, we've created an aesthetic in the county where people mow right down to the edge of lakes, and it's really terrible. It's causing algae blooms. And it would be nice to have, be it in Darden Tower, in one of our many parks in Albemarle County, some better examples of lakeside plantings to show people how gorgeous, how attractive lakeside plantings can be, and sort of maybe help encourage people to change the aesthetic around mowing directly down to lakes.
Yeah.
What do the current buffer rules require? I think you're talking more about a preference and someone being encouraged to do the right thing. Do we have any rules that lead up to good behavior in that regard?
So that's a good question. I've spent a lot of time on this issue. I think
we were just talking about this today. We've got a neighbor who's, you know, doing some downslope work that'll end up right in our lake. So I don't have any good answer yet.
Yeah. So theoretically speaking, we have the Water Protection Ordinance, right? So this gets into a little bit of complexity. It might be something good for a later meeting to talk about. So there's supposed to be what's called the Water Protection Ordinance buffer, or in Chesapeake Bay language, resource protection area, and it's delineated in the GIS. In reality, I mean, if we were following the Chesapeake Bay guidelines, there'd be you wouldn't be able to mow in that area. You wouldn't be able to do you shouldn't be doing soil disturbance or removing vegetation except for managing invasive species. But in practice, there's a lot of disturbance in that buffer. And the only time it's really enforced is when there is a change in zoning or a special use permit or a building permit issued. And then staff will enforce the buffer. But there's no proactive enforcement of the buffer outside of those times.
Is that an adoption issue where a local entity could adopt the rest of the Chesapeake Bay plan, or is that wider than our locality?
Yeah, that's something I've been trying to encourage for a long time. I think we should adopt the rest of the Bay plan.
And that's something that Albemarle County can choose to do?
That's something that Albemarle County can choose to do.
Okay.
And this, it would bring us in compliance with half the state, and half the state already operates that way. And so making the way our ordinances sound the same way as everyone else's also makes them more defensible, I think.
So buffers around streams and rivers, and wetlands, but an artificial pond like that, I should, what's that?
It still qualifies, as long as the pond is connected to a waterway, then it still qualifies. So if you've, now there are some exceptions for farm ponds, just as there's exceptions for agriculture generally speaking. Yeah. And that gets into a whole set of complexities too, because technically, like the Army Corps of Engineers, if you went out and you built a pond on your property, you'd have to do wetland mitigation. But if it's built as a farm pond, then you don't have to do wetland mitigation.
You can almost do anything.
But if a developer comes back several years later, purchases the property, and it's no longer agriculture, technically speaking, they're supposed to go back and buy those wetland mitigation credits that were supposed to be done in the first place, but no one ever does it. It never happens. So it becomes a convenient dodge around the regulations, because people go and build quote unquote farm ponds all over the place and then turn back around and say, oh, those were already there. And so they kind of dodge the whole regulation about having, first doing the mitigation and second about having the buffers.
Well, there's a practicality in this, which is, what do you reforest? Because if you stop maintenance around that pond, it's going to turn into a thicket, and people aren't going to be able to even see it. And which is not the end of the world, but it's there to be seen to some degree. And And I was thinking about, right now what the county's doing, their main maintenance, I think, in the landscape generally is mowing. And so it'd have to be a change of attitude. They'd have to start bush hogging in some places and probably tearing out vines and invasive plants in other places, even these new areas, say around that pond. So that's something to think about. How much maintenance is the county that's already stretched a little bit thin as far as maintenance? How much maintenance do we want to take on? If you do a fully native planting around the pond, there's going to be a challenge about maintaining that. And
well, I think it's a change once again. It's a change in aesthetic, yes, but it's also a change in, you kind of said before, it's a switch between mowing repeatedly all summer and bush hogging twice a year.
Right.
Or maybe even once a year. So it's a change in aesthetic, how we're doing it. There are still areas where people want to go and approach the water, and you want to create areas for that. But you don't need to have wide swaths all across the whole lakefront that are like that.
Oh, I agree. I'm thinking just about practicality. You start getting shrubs and trees in there, you can't bush hog. And a lot of what's truly native around a pond is shrubs and trees, around. It's not meadow.
I'm talking about mainly herbaceous things. I think, swamp milkweed,
Right.
native hibiscus. Meadow beauty, cardinal flower, eupatorium.
Bush.
So I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want to be mindful of the time since we only have 8 minutes left. And so one of our goals also is, to look at this outline of the work plan and to making sure that figuring out a way to prioritize, because it is a lot, right? And one of the things that may be helpful in helping us to approach some of these things as we fill in this list of person or work group partners, if we could think about even subcommittees, or what you, Kenan and Lonnie, having this really important, and Kate, this discussion about what do we do about the edges of these ponds and the Chesapeake Bay Act, to think that if we can get a group of interested people, members, to sort of take that on and make progress with it. So I think that I'd love for people to think about, as we fill in this table, where do we have some natural affinities, some possibility of subcommittees where people can agree to meet for an hour outside of our regular meeting to make progress on these areas. Just wondering what people think about that as a way of moving forward, because I feel like we run out of time and it is hard to get to this long list.
Yeah, I think subcommittees make a whole lot of sense. I think, and there are definitely some specifically around, particularly, I think, when we get into water resources planning, I think, in discussion about water resources, I think it'd be nice to have a group of people that can talk about water resource recommendations.
Yeah.
And so, there we have right there. So, and then also I think, we have goals about native plants and landscaping. And so we already have an informal committee about that. I think that's another group of people that makes sense.
That does make sense. And does anybody else have any thoughts about the subcommittees and creating those?
I'd be more than glad to devote a little time to certain specific discussions, especially, surrounding things like what we were just talking about. Absolutely.
Yeah, maybe that's another category in this table, is just brain thoughts or notes, and maybe forming subcommittees could be part of that brainstorm. There's sort of just a notes category.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Do folks think it would be useful, since we didn't really get through more than the first bullet, to continue this discussion going through the table as a group? Or just provide your feedback to the Google Doc?
Well, between the now and the next meeting, we, could try to connect maybe through a series of emails or something. Yeah, I think we do need to discuss these further, and it takes a long time.
Yeah, I think some discussion's good, and or, you know, I think I was hearing Kenan suggest like a notes thing. Like when I was looking at this earlier today and I saw that Kenan was down listed as one of the people to look on wildlife corridors and tunnels and things like that on one of the further things. And I'm thinking, oh, but I'm friends with Bridget Donaldson, who did all that, you know, has done a lot of that work. Maybe Kenan knows her, maybe he doesn't. But like, if he doesn't, then he should know that I know her and can get him in contact easily. And that, you know, I watched a presentation by her and Misty Booz from Wild Virginia about stuff, and I'm sure that their resources are just great. So even if I wasn't the one working on that particular issue, which I might be willing to help with, but there's got to be a good way for us to kind of convey that, whether it's just putting in a note here saying, hey, Emily has contact, here's the information, or should I just write directly to the people who are listed, their names, like just some sort of way of establishing how we want to communicate through or around the document, I think.
I think walking through this section by section is probably a good idea. We do have some limitations through FOIA as to conversations we can have outside of this committee meeting, unless we want to pull together a subcommittee of people that want to meet and work through this document, which could be another way of doing it. But then if we pull together a subcommittee, that committee is also subject to FOIA, and we need to announce it.
Perhaps I could make a suggestion that between our next meeting, if everybody could take a good look and add any notes to this document that we have right here, and begin there. And I think even beginning that conversation, like I could send an email out, you know, to Emily about, hey, Emily, you know, both of our names are on this. What can we begin to move forward with that? So we can make progress, and then on our next meeting, begin to kind of go through the next set of goals. How does that sound?
I just want to let everybody know that next month's meeting, if you need to go longer to cover things, I'm not going to schedule anything this night. This was kind of one of those meetings that kind of popped up that they really needed to do for some project that's going on. So that's the only reason I have to cut you guys short tonight. And I am very sorry. There's only one of me. We can only have one Zoom meeting at a time. And so I am sorry for cutting you a little short today, but next month, we can go as long as you want. I won't schedule any meetings after, so that since you guys have a lot to talk about, so that you'll have plenty of time to get that done.
Hopefully we can moderate it so we don't lose attention span. I tend to kind of lose the ability to focus after a certain amount of time.
2 hours is a lot.
So,
Yeah, 2 hours is probably enough.
Yeah.
And I have a little girl here wanting my attention, so.
Yeah. So yes, thank you all for your time. I think if we could get everybody just to really hone in onto this document, add their thoughts, we can begin some conversations. And I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. Thank you, Carolyn, Tom, Olivier, and
Rod and Maggie.
Ruth, Margaret, Rod and Maggie Walker. Thank you guys all for participating. And I hope you all have a great evening and it'll be just about the end of summer by the time we meet again. Who knows what the world will look like then, right?
Okay.
All right.
Good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Good to see you all.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.